Doing well. My name is Sadhvi Ishani, and I'm a Vedic educator in the Saryu Sampradaya, Acharya Shunya's lineage, and I've been a student of hers for many years and a teacher inside of her programs. And it is with immense joy and readiness that I join you today. We're here at the beginning of what will be an 8-part series, looking deeply at the 6 verses of the Nirvana Shatakam. And throughout this, I'll be referencing Acharya Shunya's satsangas on this. So you may see that there is a library where you can view her 8 satsangas on this topic. If you've watched those and deeply imbibed those already, wonderful. These sessions will be a beautiful companion to that. They'll help you focus and deepen your slow and integrated look at those teachings. If you've not yet encountered those satsangas yet, also perfectly fine. These sessions will give you some highlights, some suggested contemplations, so that when you do make it to those satsangas, you'll be prepped, you'll be ready to receive what she shares there. So no matter what, you're in the right place at the right time. Welcome. So this is our first session looking at this text, and for such a short text of only 6 verses, to have 8 sessions to look at it means we can really be mindful and slow with it each time. And so our purpose here in this first session is to really get a rich context around this hymn. We'll be preparing ourselves so that we can really drop down into this wisdom that these verses offer. And if you've had any familiarity with Adi Shankaracharya or you've encountered Acharya Shunya satsangas on it, you know that the story of this stage of India has so many miraculous and larger than life episodes inside of it. It includes his life begins in a dream to the divine. It has stories about crocodiles. It has stories about precocious children. It has stories of a mother's love that begins to hold back and then ultimately sets free. His life story encapsulates this description of a lifetime of a continent-wide on-foot journey, self-directed, traversing all the diverse cultures, kingdoms of 9th century India, where somebody had this kind of courage and bravery to decide they would take on the important work of recalibrating and recentering the Vedic thought that had become quite distorted and muddled and pulled away from its essence by that time. We're going to encounter this person in Adi Shankaracharya who had the courage to stand up to dogmatic institutions, to corrupted religious institutions, and truly a human being that seeded in the 4 most remote corners of India at that time centers for spiritual home. And that he himself trained students who could nourish those roots, and those roots have become these trees that we now sit under of wisdom and knowledge. And so there's a bit of awe we have for who this person is. And the amazing thing is that in the middle of this incredible life of only 32 years, he was able to achieve all of those feats that are documented and stories told about. But this text reveals to us how his consciousness stood firm, how he remained fully awake from the moment he knew he was meant to follow a spiritual journey, all the way through that lifetime of study, teaching, travel, writing, organizational establishing of things. All the way through, these 6 verses are said to be the first way of introduction, his first utterance to his guru, when he first met his guru, and the guru simply asked, "Who are you?" And these were what spontaneously emerged. And as well at the end, after that full life lived uh, in such a short amount of time, these were the 6 verses that are said to be his final utterance before his body left, uh, his body transitioned into death. So I just know that when I hear the context around Adi Shankara's very human and embodied life, and I hear that there are these 6 verses that take to read them at a stretch, maybe 3 minutes or less to say, that they encapsulate this fundamental wisdom that he seemingly came to earth with. And they're also the same fundamental wisdom that he chose to leave the earth on. I just feel so curious, and I want to know what those verses were. I want to hear them. I want to understand each word of those. What is the meaning? What is the essence behind each of those words? I want to bring all of those things into my mind and see what it knits together. What truth does it combine? What connections does it make? And once I've heard them, and once I've understood them, and once I've intellectually run them through, I want to bring them into my heart, and I want to know what it means for me, but also how those verses can lead me toward that state that he must have been embodying at the moment that he first uttered them. What kind of consciousness was he carrying at that time? These verses, when we look at them, not only do they inspire us with what state he's present in, but they also offer a strategy, a technique, a methodology of how we can join him there in that state. And so we'll unpack that also over these next six verses. We'll see how there's beautiful insight and there's a step-by-step path for us. And that as we walk that path, accompanied by his verses, something emerges from within us, and we'll discover what that is over the coming sessions. So I'd like you to now just pause, and in this moment right now, try to grasp the idea that there was at some point a human being on this earth of this magnitude that drank water from the river streams, that ate fruit from the trees and was guest in people's homes, that slept under the shade, that was warmed by the same sun that warms us, that was cooled by the same moon that cools us, that his body eventually went back to the same earth that we live on, and that in that short time of his life's mission, um, what an echo it had, because here we are, and his words, his teachings are now reaching our ears over 1,000 years later. They're going to be taking a shape inside of our imagination. They're going to be entering our own hearts. So just pausing for a moment and acknowledging that sacredness, acknowledging that timeless power of truth. The process that we'll be following for these sessions, these are called Swadhyay. And I welcome you back as we look at where we're headed forward. Swadhyay means a self-study. And we'll be moving from hearing our satsang from Acharya Shunya, hearing what's reviewed here, hearing to feeling the impact of those verses, resting them in our own experience, seeing how they reverberate for us, what shift comes. So we'll be doing those steps as we go during these sessions, and there'll be a role model for you as you sit with these yourselves. First, you'll be listening and hearing, then we'll be contemplating, we'll be churning it in our mind, and then we'll bring a distillation of those thoughts, moving beyond the intellect, beyond the definitions, beyond even the Sanskrit words, and we'll be drawing them into our own experience, into our own wordless experience in our hearts. So you'll be offered inside of these Swadhyaya sessions a few highlights, a few pinpointed constellations of ideas that have come from Acharya Shunya's teaching and from the text. And some suggested ways of engaging with those, some suggested contemplations. And you'll be invited to just hold a few of those in your mind and then take the time with them. See what they dislodge, see what questions they come up. And we'll have time inside of these Swadhyaya sessions, maybe after a few meetings, we'll have some time for some Q&A where you can bring your revelations, your contemplations, your questions. If you're ready to bring those now, you can, inside of Acharya Shunya's Vedic Study Circle, there's a community forum there. So if you're there, you can bring them there immediately and we can churn them together. So that's our way forward. That's our structure that we'll be following. And as you draw these ideas through the ears into the intellect and down into a felt experience of them, the kinds of questions you can ask yourself is, what truth does this shed light on? What is the one truth these are all pointing to? What reality does it illuminate? So we want to become aware of some existence, some presence of truth underneath these contemplations that we have. So let's begin that process. In Advaita Vedanta, we are told that there is a very specific problem that Advaita Vedanta has identified that all humans face, and to solve it, we have to give some things up. And now I've said the word, we have to give something up. So anytime we think about giving something up, there's a drawing back. There may be a little hesitancy. There may be a little inner reaction because it doesn't sound that great to give something up. But what Nirvana Shatakam tells us, and what the Advaita Vedanta tradition overall tells us, is there's a very simple way to address this problem statement. Because it's that every human carries these layers and layers of coverings. We all have these layers, and our true nature is submerged underneath them. So there are ideas, expectations, desires, scripted roles, habits, ambitions, seeking of pleasure, pampering we do to our ego. There's so many things that we've taken onto our shoulders. It's like layers of padded winter clothes that we've put on with the intention that they're going to protect us, keep us safe, keep us warm, keep us nourished. And we think that these things will make us happy, make us comfortable, give us meaning, purpose. But in the end, when we're really honest with ourselves, all of those things leave us somewhat empty-handed, struck with loss. Again, feeling incomplete, powerless, fearful, confused. And for some of us, depending on our life situations, for some of us, that feeling can be like drowning in an emptiness. It can feel like hitting a rock bottom. And where we finally can't get anything we want in the world, and now we have no choice but to seek spiritual answers. Another side of the spectrum is when everything seems to be pretty much okay outside, we think we've got it, but there's still this nagging little feeling. There's still this part of us wondering, is this really it? Is this all there is? Can this possibly, is this enough? And anything in between. The human experience can fall anywhere in between, but we do know that no matter how much we add on, we are never satisfied to the core. At the same time, Vedic teachings do give us plenty of guidance, plenty of support for how to navigate the day-to-day life, how to live in the world. We have the teachings of Dharma. We have the teachings of Karma Yoga, which Acharya Shunya will spend all of 2025 unfolding for us. So we have ways to live powerfully and at relative ease inside of the world. But fundamentally, and at the end of the day, the way out of this feeling of heaviness yet unfulfillment is having to give something up. Is having to let go of something. And so in this text, verse by verse by verse, and the Advaita tradition on whole, it asks us to give up the coverings. It asks us to slough them off, to exfoliate them from ourselves. It asks us to prune them back. And little by little, by contemplation on verses like these that we'll encounter in Nirvana Shatakam, little by little we reveal what was once submerged. We reveal that inner light. We become more and more aware of what's truly shining from within us. And so that's actually quite good news, because there are these fruits, there are these benefits that we can expect to receive from contemplation of Nirvana Shatakam. Yeah, we have to prune back, but we won't be left empty. We have to cut away, but we won't be left with nothing to hold. We won't be left in a vacuum. We'll become aware of this presence, which can sometimes be called Ishvara, which can sometimes be called divine consciousness. We'll become aware of what's really there and had been previously covered. And so in that process, there's the pala shruti, the fruit, the pala, the palam of the shruti, of the transmission. It's a heard transmission. So the fruit of this transmission of these teachings is that one of them is a sense of lightness. We begin to understand what we're not. This verse will take us word by word, pointing out we're not that, we're not that, we're not that. And as we begin to understand what we are not, we become a little less invested and fused with all of those things. We've been lugging around like in a big, heavy backpack. We've been lugging around in our hearts and in our minds this thing's full of baggage that we think we need, that is going to protect us and sustain us. And it turns out that it's not true. It turns out that instead, it's actually covering up our real source of power and direction. And actually, all those things we've been holding around and fearful of letting go of are the exact things that are weighing us down and keeping us hidden from our own selves. So each verse that we encounter in the Nirvana Shatakam is going to be like opening that backpack vulnerably, consciously, and taking out one object at a time and gazing at it and setting it down, and taking out another piece and gazing at it and setting it down. And we'll begin to feel lighter all along the way. Another fruit of this inquiry is going to not only be pruning back and cutting away and feeling light because we're letting go of who we're not, but it's also this constant reminder, this reassurance, this reassertion of who we truly are. And we're going to hear in this text a refrain. At the end of each verse, we'll hear again these same lines repeated and repeated, which are telling us again and again, who we are, who we are, who we are. And even in the sixth verse is the final one, in the sixth verse, it will again try to put some words to what is fundamentally indescribable of who we truly are. So in this process, we're now entering into a process, a container that this text gives us, where we will pull out and exhume something that is not us. We'll empty out and become again aware of our fullness. We will discard and then discover inner gifts. So it's going to be this dance that this text with each verse invites us to join it on. Letting go and seeing what's there. Letting go and remembering our fullness. So that's one way to frame this journey ahead of us as this dance between emptying and finding fullness. So I'll pause here. Let's pause and just let these ideas reverberate in your mind for a moment. Let them settle for a moment. Maybe if there's a word or two that has struck you or an idea that struck you, you could note it for yourself. Now, as we stand on, we're on a bit of a precipice right now. We're on the starting gate of a journey that promises to be deep and profound, this text. And because this is a contemplation series, we're not interested in simply memorizing these words, memorizing these verses, going on chanting, chanting, chanting until our jaws become tired. No, we're trusting the promise of this verse that if we truly sit with it, something alchemical, something transformative can happen. So to stand at the beginning of that kind of journey, it's good to pause and take stock of how we are right now, ready to begin. I just described how this journey is going to ask us to discard many things, to let go of many things, to soften our stickiness that we often feel with many, many things. And the mind has become very attached to some of those things. And the mind has assigned a lot of those things a meaning and has fused its identity with it. And it's guiding us towards the discovery. And I'm not giving it away because actually the joy of it is in the experience step by step. But this text is guiding us to the discovery that those things don't actually mean what we think they mean. They're not actually giving us what we think they're giving us. So when you sit at this idea of letting go, of discarding, of setting aside many things that the mind may be fused with, that may feel very, very important without having been deeply examined. How does that feel? The idea that we want to now, this text is going to ask us to surrender ourselves to that kind of inquiry. How does it feel? And as we sit with that question of how we feel looking ahead at this journey, we'll know that each of these verses is going to kind of drill into us like a bore well toward groundwater, like a core sample that is going to reveal all these layers within us. It's going to show where the threads are bare in all these layers that we've been carrying. And when we stand on the precipice of that, we may have different responses. We may feel excited and enthusiastic and ready to just jump in and do it and throw it all away. We may feel hesitant, uh, unsure, not quite convinced, a little worried. Maybe thinking, okay, I can do all these things, but maybe not that one. I'm not ready to investigate or let go. So wherever it is, wherever it's placed for you, I invite you to bring that onto your table also, however you are feeling it, and remembering that whether it's resistance or fear, knowing that these texts are always benevolent and auspicious. And even if it's excitement and ready to dive headlong into it, tempering that a little with a sense of patience, a sense of ease, reminding ourselves that we don't have to quickly get through all these videos, get through all these sessions to wrap this up and finish it up. This is a lifetime's long journey, so we are quite timeless in it. Our goal here is to create measured and sustainable steps along the way. So you can take a moment to consider that for yourself. You may have studied this text in depth already with Acharya Shunya through her satsangs, or with another valuable and respected teacher, or on your own. So this may not be the first time that you're encountering this, but it might be a good time now to have an inner rededication to your own self-study, your own exploration of this text, and notice how you feel this time you're facing it. This time you're looking at taking it forward. Yeah. The next piece of Acharya Shunya's satsang that we heard, and that is important for us to look at again, and also is just one of the most, personally, one of the most fantastical stories of of Adi Shankaracharya's life, is this episode that he had with the crocodile. There was in this story, there was the river and the crocodile and the mother, and I'll summarize it in a few sentences for you in a moment. But as we look at this story, on the one hand, it's this fantastic story that could only have happened to somebody so divine, so special, so unique. And so, on the one hand, it serves for us to look up to Adi Shankaracharya and see something special and divine in him, that this could be a part of his life, that this could happen to him. But let's also investigate this episode, this story, and see what insights it offers for us into the nature of our own self and to the nature of our own journey we have to move forward. So perhaps you've heard this story elsewhere many times. Perhaps you recently have heard it in the satsanga, but I'll summarize it for you here. Our Adi Shankaracharya, since a very young age, he was desperately begging his mother to let him take sannyas, to let him renounce the world and become a wandering monk, live the life of a renunciant. And she resisted. His mother kept telling him, no, you're too young. She herself would have been alone because her husband, Adi Shankaracharya's father, died when he was only 3, so she might not have wanted to let her child go. She would have missed him. She would have missed him. And she was afraid to send her child out into the world just like that. So we can imagine her resistance to letting him leave. But when he was about 12, they were together down by this river, and there was a wide river with a bank, and Adi Shankaracharya was in the water, and a crocodile emerges from the depths and captures his foot and begins to pull him down deep into the depths of the river. And on the shore, the mother is standing, and she's looking frantic, worried, helpless. And so intuitively, Adi Shankaracharya knew that if his mother would give him permission to take on the life of a renunciant, to take sannyas, to become a monk, he would be freed. He intuitively knew this. And so he calls to his mother and tells her this. And she, seeing no way out of it, no other option, gives him permission, says, okay, yes, you can. And the moment she gives her blessing to this, the crocodile releases him, leaves him, and he is freed and unharmed. Let's picture this tableau for a moment. We have deep in the depths this seemingly dangerous, seemingly scary and, you know, intimidating animal with sharp teeth, drawing this innocent, pure child into the water. And the mother on the shore, frantic, helpless, probably breathless in her worry and fear. And somehow suspended between these two is Adi Shankaracharya, is this child. And knowing that child's knowing that the only thing that would free it, the only way out of this seemingly intractable situation is that he be given permission to follow his soul's journey, be given the blessing to embark on the life he knows he's meant to lead, which is a life of deep self-inquiry and service. So I wonder that for the story to have been carried to us from over 1,200 years ago, it has to be more meaningful than just to be something to make us feel very impressed with Adi Shankaracharya. There has to also be meaning and insight for us as seekers in this as well. So as you look at that picture, as you look at that image, what part of it comes up most in you? What part of it strikes you the most is something to consider. Is it the pulling the crocodile pulling down? Is it the helpless mother on the banks? Is it the child calm yet pulled in two directions? Um, and the symbolism for Adi Shankaracharya here was that if you if you don't leave this mundane life, if you don't leave the day-to-day life, you will be pulled down into the depths and lost forever. That was the meaning for him. If you surrender to being pulled deep into what we call samsara, to this churning and frothing and distracting and um, enticing and confusing and seemingly endlessly rattling world of samsara, you'll be stuck in it forever. So he knew he had to become free. So if you've reached this point in today's session or recording,
दो चार पत्ता छोड़ के पूरा
um, so if you've come here, then clearly you're not a uh, casual or a dabbler in spirituality. Clearly you are have some intuitive knowing yourself that for you there is a spiritual path that you're meant to take. And even if you're well along on your journey, even if you've been a student or a seeker or a follower of Vedic wisdom for years, maybe lifetimes, there may still be areas where you're pulled away from what you know is your true journey. And so I would be curious to know, or it's a good question to ask, is what is the inner permission that you're waiting to hear from the shore so that you can be set free to take the next step of your spiritual journey? Another way to say it is, what inner permission are you waiting to receive so you feel like you can continue to embark on the next step of your journey toward truth? And I'll give you a moment to just let that question echo within. And maybe there's a idea of picturing this imagery of this episode from Adi Shankaracharya's life. And what would that person on the shore have to tell you for you to be set free? And knowing that it's actually not anyone else outside that needs to give any permissions, that needs to tell you anything. It's actually an inner permission that you may need to investigate. So, like this, we can look at the stories of Adi Shankaracharya and find in them not only things that impress us, things that convince us that his words are compelling, things that prove to us that he's incredibly intellectually capable, how many texts he wrote, how many commentaries he wrote, how those are still the gold standard of Advaita Vedanta scholarship today. All these things, yes, they're true. They give us confidence. But as we go ahead, we can also look at what his journey has to tell us about ourselves and how it can guide us as we move forward. So let us pause there. I'll tell you that in our next session, we'll begin to look at each of those individual words, each verse of the text itself. And we're going to pore over each of those words, looking at its meaning, looking at its implications for our identity as ourself, as the Atman, as the soul. And to prepare for that process, you may wish to download the text so that you can have those words with you. You can find this text. You can also download it from the portal of the Vedic Study Circle. We'll keep a link here for that. And these questions that you've been given today, these reminders of the context around Adi Shankaracharya's life, these are starting points. These are starting points. And give some suggestion for as you sit with this wisdom and contemplation yourself. As more questions come up for you, as I mentioned, we will plan for time to have our live interaction around those. But I'd also again invite you to join the conversation on our community forum as well. And then keep a link for how you can become a part of that. And we'll be continuing these monthly. So you'll have time in between to continue to study with those. So what we'll leave with today, how we'll close today is tapping into a feeling of awe and gratitude for the presence of Adi Shankaracharya in the world, how his words, how his lived experience is shaping the literal wisdom path that we are literally walking in this 1,200 years later. And we've also investigated a clear-eyed look at what is coming ahead for us. And I hope a realistic look of the challenge, of the process, of the letting go, but also the promise of remembering our fullness. And through this lens of the incredible sage behind this text and this time-tested methodology for helping us unite with his same conscious awareness of his own self, through letting go of all that we are not and dwelling in the awareness of who we are, that's what we have to look ahead to. So in the meantime, until we meet again, you're invited to sit with your own contemplations. You're invited to review the satsangas of the Nirvana Shatakam. You're invited to try to spend more time allowing the words to come in and then bringing them into your heart space and dwelling in your experience of them. I want to show gratitude to, of course, Adi Shankaracharya and our teacher and this lineage of teachings that has made it possible for us to, from teacher to student to teacher to student, and crafted communities like this, where we sit with each other and receive these same vibrations and let them work on us. A gratitude for that entire tradition and the insights and benefits that are passed on through these Swadhyay sessions today and the ones to follow are only from this grace of this kind of tradition. I feel a personal gratitude to Acharya Shunya as my own teacher as well. And any mistakes or missteps, those are coming from me. I own them. So with that, let us close today with a prayer, Asatoma. This prayer is invoking that journey of moving from untruth, all those heavy coverings, to the freedom of truth, to the lightness of truth, from the darkness of everything about our deepest self being muffled, covered, and hidden, to the light of the truth of it all, to being bright and shining and in our awareness. And from the idea that we are fragile and temporary and bound to be broken and decaying at some point, to the truth of our real essence that is timeless, deathless, immortal. So with that prayer, we close. Join if you wish. Om Asato Ma Sakkamaya Tamaso Ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityorma Amritangamaya. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Om Peace, peace. Jai Ma. We'll meet again next month for these sessions and very much at all of the wonderful sessions in between. So we'll meet again soon.